I thought you mentioned that, but
All right, so is everyone here for a talk called this? Or is anyone not here for a talk called this? Good. The other thing I'll say before we start, if you read the sketch description, you'll know this already, but this is intended for an audience with no security background. So if you have come here to talk about the varying strengths of different ciphers and cipher suites or ways to attack security software, topics like that, you will find this talk boring and inapplicable to you. If, however, you want to figure out how to have better security in your personal life and your work life, and you're not a security engineer, if you are a security engineer, you probably do all this stuff already, but if that describes you, then you're in the right place. So this is a good time, if that doesn't describe you, to, without any social cost, be like, I don't want to be bored for the next 45 minutes, and you're welcome to roll. Okay. Great. The second thing I'll say is that I'm going to be looking at my... Actually, no, I'm not going to be looking at my phone, because that's just distracting. We'll just kind of do it live. With my notes. Okay, so hi, I'm Gene. I work in the Enterprise Information Security team at Mozilla. So that's the security team that does not the security inside the Firefox browser, not the security of Firefox Sync, but all the other securities that are not those things. And so today we'll talk about four things, assuming we have the time. And we have 45 minutes, I think. Let me make sure that's... No, we have 1 hour. Great. Okay, so we're going to talk about passwords, access control, so I'll explain what that is, what to do if you see something is wrong, and physical access recommendations. Oh, and another thing. Raise your hand at any point here, ask questions. This is not, this is primarily Q&A, but this is the structure that will probably answer some questions that people have, but feel free to just throw questions in as we go. And there'll be some time at the end as well. Okay. So before I talk about passwords, I'll briefly just talk about why does this matter. So if you work with Mozilla stuff, if you work at Mozilla, if you're a contributor, if you are related to Mozilla in some way, you, to one degree or another, are a target to attackers. Let me close that door real quick. You're a target to attackers because you, thank you very much. You are a potential stepping stone to get them closer to what they want. And I'll give you two examples of things that they want that you might get them a bit closer to, which is why they care about you. One is our Firefox code base. So if they can get themselves inside the process that we take source code and build it into the actual Firefox executable that ends up on users' computers, if they can get inside there and get their code inside of Firefox, that gives them an install base of the entire Firefox, like all the Firefox users in the world. So that's very desirable for them. It's not desirable for us. The second thing that they might want to do is to, for example, get into Bugzilla and look at security tickets that they're not supposed to see, because those tickets give them insight into vulnerabilities that we haven't yet fixed in our software. And then they can remotely exploit Firefox and again get their code on millions and millions of computers. So that's what they want, and the reason that you are between them and that, even if you're not a Firefox developer, is because getting your account or getting privileges that you have is a stepping stone, is a way that they can leverage that into getting further access into Mozilla and eventually getting what they want. Questions about the why are we talking about this? This is a botnet that someone made called CarNet, I believe it's called. It's a research botnet by a questionably hat-colored researcher who made a botnet to go out and find out when people are on the internet and what kind of stuff they do for the purposes of research, but possibly not a good way to do it. Anyways. Okay, so we'll talk about passwords. That's the first item. The first thing that I would have to say is don't reuse passwords. Here is a list of all of the sites out there that have been compromised. Compromised meaning an attacker broke in and got some of the users' information out. You can see how many users each one of these sites has, 4 million, 3 million. It varies what they got. In the worst case scenario, they get your plain text password that if you reuse it on other sites, they now have it and they can use on any of your sites. Best case scenario, they get just your email address or a very secure version of your password, and it's very hard for them to derive what the password actually is. But the point is, sites are going to get compromised. They do right now, they do all the time, and so if you reuse passwords, if you use the same password on one of these sites or a future site that hasn't shown up on the list yet, as well as on your Gmail account or your Facebook or whatever, as soon as they breach this site, they will immediately take your email address and your password and just go try it on all the popular sites out there. And so if you use the same password, they have then compromised multiple accounts of yours. And what was initially maybe not that bad, because maybe some low value, maybe the porn site that you go to and you use your really crappy password for, they compromise. You don't care about that. But then they use that same password on your Gmail account, and then they can get into your bank from using Gmail, and things get really ugly. So, what do I want to say about this? How many people use the same password on multiple sites? And it's okay if you do. I'm not trying to shame anyone. I'm just kind of curious. Nobody uses the same password on multiple sites.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So, what do you? I'm distrustful of password managers and they can be compromised as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, realistically, given all the passwords you have to use nowadays, say you have a unique password with every single site, it's difficult.
It's not difficult. It is not. Okay, there are probably a few humans who can do this. But if I was going to tell you, you should memorize a unique password for every website that you go to, that's not a reasonable request. That's not achievable.
I don't, but even writing it down is a pain in the ass.
Absolutely. So we're skipping ahead, but my recommendation, which I'll talk about in a moment, is to use a password manager, and I'll tell you why in just a second.
Okay.
But okay, so you use the same password in a few places, or were you just asking?
Yeah, a few places.
Okay. Who uses different passwords on every site, but like the beginning is kind of the same, and then you like do some trick and put something at the end or something? Okay. Okay. That's great. So it looks like most people. So okay, of the people who did not raise their hands, who doesn't use a password manager? Tell me briefly what it is that you do if you have different passwords on every site but don't use a password manager.
I use password reset.
Say again?
Password reset. Because
Password reset, okay.
security, it doesn't matter if
Absolutely.
I use a password manager.
Password reset is a totally
It's safe.
viable solution, yeah.
I have the mnemonic based on the URL for each.
Okay, so that's in the category of a common thing and then a trick thing. The point is, if someone figured out your trick, you'd be busted, right? Like if someone compromised one site and figured out your trick, then they would be able to get into other sites. Right, I don't mean the mnemonic thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good, that's good. So, what I would recommend, so I have friends who have experienced this exact sequence of events: low quality site, reused password, compromised, not to their knowledge, and then escalated to taking over their Facebook account, for example, where they reused their password. The reason it matters for Mozilla is what I was saying before with the why, which is that many things that use at Mozilla probably are well protected. They've got a good password. They might even have multi-factor authentication, which we'll talk about in a bit. But there's a lot of things that you use to access Mozilla, not just the main password that you might log into Discourse or Mana with. So, I recommend you use a unique and different password for every site. And the way to achieve that is to use a password manager. So for the few people who don't know, password manager is software that runs on your computer. You have one password that you memorize that gets you into your password manager, and all of your distinct passwords are stored in there. And maybe it's a piece of software that integrates with your browser, and so it fills them in for you. These are two popular password managers. I'm not putting these two here and not others because you should use these and not the others. Most important is to use a password manager of any kind. And to your earlier question about, or statement about I don't trust password managers, my opinion, and it's okay to disagree with this, my opinion is that the risk that you take on of a compromise of the security of a password manager and then the compromise of your accounts is much lower than the risk you take on through password reuse, through using your brain as your password manager. You don't have to agree with that, but that's what I would say is the rationale.
So what about an Excel file that is password protected compared to one of these?
So password protection on Excel files is not really...
No, they don't know which file it is. No.
True. So I would say a password protected Excel file is definitely not as strong as one of these. And let me say that differently. The risk that you hold by using a local password file, local Excel file with passwords with encryption or whatever Excel passwords do, versus one of these, you are at more risk with your Excel file.
That's some of you the problem is.
Neither of these are open source. The key difference between KeePass and these is that these are, well, actually, 1Password isn't really a cloud thing, is it?
It is. Most
Kind
people
of.
who use 1Password.
Okay, so the key difference, or a difference, is these are, the LastPass is cloud-based, meaning that all of your passwords are stored in the cloud and accessible from your phone and your laptop, whereas KeePass, you can use it in a cloud context. The chain of things you have to do to make that doable is definitely achievable for a security person and possibly achievable by a normal person, but not pleasant for anybody. I'm not saying don't use KeePass, don't get me wrong. If you have a good KeePass setup, that's great. The key is to use a password manager, and if it works for you and it fits with your vibe, that's great. So, you've got your password manager, you got all your passwords in it, and you've memorized your one good strong password. And by good strong password, I mean not a dictionary word, something that's long. I'll call out an interesting thing that maybe is not well understood. I think most people believe that it is better to have a password with lots of weird characters in it, uppercase and lowercase and numbers and special characters, that's like what makes a strong password. And the funny thing is that length is actually much more important than the complexity of the password. So if you can make a long password that is easy to remember, as long as it's not, a phrase from Shakespeare or a dictionary word or something like that, that's much better than making something that's super hard to memorize because it is all these crazy character classes. Okay, so you got all your passwords in here. You've got 1Password that's protecting this. Let's go back to this concern over here. What if they guess your great 1Password? Then they get all of your passwords, right? So that sounds horrible. And so a great way to mitigate against that is multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor auth is a way to protect something by not only a password that you've memorized, but also a physical object that you have. For example, your phone, or a YubiKey right here, or other things. Anyone else have a multi-factor auth token other than a phone or a YubiKey? Okay, so one of these objects, and I'll tell you what it does and I'll tell you how it works. So what it does is it means that the people who can try to break into your 1Password or LastPass account goes from the community of everyone on the internet in every country around the world to the people who are on the internet and who can physically get to where you are and take your stuff. And so the great thing about that is that it means that the field of attackers gets reduced to a much, much smaller order of magnitude. I mean, if you think about it, it changes it to almost nothing, right? Because the community of people who are actually going to mug you to take your phone, and then maybe they'll beat out of you what your password is, right? Maybe that's the point is it's a very small community. It's a very small risk factor. So multi-factor authentication protects against that because it means the attacker has to guess your password, the thing that you've memorized, and they got to take your stuff, which is great. Any questions about that? Yeah.
So I use one of these YubiKeys,
Mhm.
but on my phone, I let it automatically log in with the fingerprints.
Mhm.
Does that compromise the security?
It doesn't compromise it. So you have an Apple phone
Android.
with a fingerprint reader.
Yep.
Okay. So Android should be storing your biometrics in a special area of the phone that has its own OS. It depends on what phone you have and stuff like that. But it should be storing that in a very secure way, in a different way than the rest of the stuff you store on your phone, such that it should function very well as a second factor. So yeah, that should be fine. The thing to be careful of is if you have your password manager on your phone and you leave it logged in because it's super convenient, then you kind of have a problem because then as soon as you lose your phone, it's not second factor protected. So yeah.
There's also different legal implications of using fingerprint biometrics over a password, particularly here in the U.S. You can be forced by a judge to give your fingerprint. You cannot be forced.
You can't use your Fifth Amendment rights to protect
Right.
your body.
Right.
Hopefully a corner case. Hopefully not something that you need to worry about. Okay, so multi-factor authentication, it's free. Google Authenticator, if you work at Mozilla, you probably already have Duo Authenticator on your phone. That's one. Google Authenticator, free OTP. There's a whole bunch of free ones of these things. And you can enable multi-factor auth not only on your password manager, on most password managers, not all. You can also enable it on sites that you care about it on. So if I was going to tell you one site that you should make sure to enable it on, it is your email provider. So I would say the minimum bar, the way to do the least work and get to the best situation is to get a password manager, use MFA on your password manager, and enable MFA on your email provider. So all the major ones support it. I don't know if Yahoo does. But Gmail and Hotmail and... Everyone has Gmail accounts now? Is that just the world we live in? Okay. Yeah. So enable multi-factor authentication on those things and other sites that you care about. And I will say one more thing about that, which is that because of the way multi-factor auth works, it keeps the bad guys out because they can't get your phone. But if you lose your phone, this is a problem. So each of these services has a process, and it's going to be different for each one, of what do you do when you lose your second factor token. In the process of enabling multi-factor auth, pay attention to what that is, and do a thought experiment as you're enabling it, and think to yourself, what am I going to do the day that my YubiKey, I leave it on top of my motorcycle, I walk down the block, I come back 20 seconds later, and it's gone. There's my losing my YubiKey story. Or your phone, or whatever. What are you going to do in that scenario? And make sure you have a good story for that before you enable multi-factor auth. What I do is, so for example, Facebook, they ask for your phone number so they can text you if you lose your MFA token. GitHub gives you a bunch of codes that you can use one time to get back in. Whatever that thing is, I note that in my password manager in like the notes field of the account. You may be thinking to yourself, wait, doesn't that ruin everything if you put your backup codes in your password manager? It does if they get into your password manager, but if you've protected your password manager with a multi-factor auth token, you still have two factors between the bad guys and your stuff. So yeah, make sure you know what you're going to do when you lose your second factor, and note that somewhere. I do it in my password manager. You can do it offline. If you're only going to do MFA on your password manager and your email, you could just write those backup methods down. You know, if you get the codes, you could just print them out, keep them somewhere safe. It's totally fine. But just consider what you're going to do on that day, before that day comes. Anything else on that day? Great. So, I would recommend going back to the why at the beginning of why do you care about this. Because you work on Mozilla stuff, I would recommend that you take that fact into consideration and level up your security to a degree. Meaning, if you have a Bugzilla account, make sure that you enable multi-factor auth in your Bugzilla account and have a good, strong password that's not used somewhere else. Same thing if you are a GitHub user and you commit code. Enable multi-factor auth on GitHub, have a strong password. Your email provider, same story. Because these are good examples of pathways that attackers are going to try to get to you. And when I say email, I don't mean your work email. Your work email is already protected by MFA if you work at Mozilla. If you don't, your work email may not be. But your personal email is also a target. Like, an attacker will totally try to compromise your personal email because that is a great way to escalate into Mozilla. Like, yeah, if you have a Gmail account, that's an awesome way to get escalated privileges. So, do these things. It takes a small amount of effort, and it will pay you in dividends of not sleepless nights, because you'll know you'll be secure. Okay. Any questions about those sites or anything like that? All right, let's talk about access control. So access control is the way that, so the first thing we talk about is passwords. That's like how you prove who you are. You know, you're trying to convince the computer you're talking to that you are who you say you are. You're that one person and not someone pretending to be that one person. Access control is after you've completed that. It's the computer determining what you should and shouldn't have access to. If you go into Workday, you see your Workday is the HR system that Mozilla, that Moco uses, and Moco, I guess. You go into Workday, you see your data about you, but not information about me, and you can't go in, unless you're in HR, and fire me through Workday. And that's because of access control, because different people have access to different things. So, one thing I have found, working in the world of Mozilla, is that over time, the more stuff you work on, the more access you get. You work on some project, you get access to the docs and maybe the repos that project uses. Maybe you join some Tiger team temporarily for something, and you get access to that stuff. You come back, you change jobs, maybe you work in some other group, and over time you just build access, more and more access to different stuff. This has happened to me working in different groups. I think this happens a lot at Mozilla. A really, really good practice to do is to, on some periodic basis, I like to do it quarterly because I just kind of remember to do it around the quarter mark. Think about what's changed over the last quarter, last period of time. What do you have access to that you don't actually need anymore? And what you should do is seek out the people who are authoritative for that thing, the repo owner in GitHub, the Google Doc author, the original author, the team that owns the doc, and ask to be removed, ask to be taken out. And what I will say is that doing that, and then maybe 3 months later, a month later, you realize, oh wait, you do need access to that thing, going back and saying, actually, hey, my bad, I want to commit to this thing or something like that. It's easy, people are friendly about it. I've never gotten any like pushback or anything like that, but in that doing it that way is so much better because it means that if your account does get compromised, the impact of that is constrained to not everything you've ever worked on, but what you specifically do these days. And multiple of our worst breaches at Mozilla have been due to this, well, not due to this problem, due to other problems, but the reason that it was bad is because the access that the attackers got was to stuff that that person didn't need or use at all at the time, but still had from previous jobs, previous projects they've done. So, does that make sense? Yeah.
It's also a great way to prevent people from distracting you that think you don't work on anymore.
That's right. I can't do that. Sorry, it's I don't have access. Yeah, that's true. So the corollary to this is kind of the other side. If you are responsible for documents, code, data, systems, servers, if you are a responsible party for something and you are the one who grants other people access to stuff, I also recommend on a quarterly basis going through and thinking to yourself, what am I responsible for, and who have I granted access to? Who are all the people with write permission into my GitHub repo? Who are all the people in the share drop-down in my Google Doc? And find people who don't need it, haven't been active, aren't part of that anymore, and remove them. And I will say essentially the same thing I did before, which is that I have found when you do that, it's never a problem. I've had instances where people came back and were like, hey, I still need access to that. And I just re-enabled them, and it's fine. And that small little speed bump of that potential inconvenience of someone actually needing access and you thinking that they don't, totally smaller than the huge benefit of constraining the impact of a compromise to only what people actually need to have access to. Yeah.
One ask question, sorry, it's not related to this.
Sure.
I have to go to another meeting. And I'm just curious. I know if you get an email from me, you don't know, don't click on the links and all that. But by virtue of, because I'm in a role where I need to see if people send something, if I don't know someone, and I just open the email, that in itself opens doors.
Highly unlikely. There would have to be, which email, you mean?
Please Gmail, like.
Okay, yeah. There would have to be vulnerabilities in Gmail itself that are not yet known for just looking at the email to be a problem.
Okay, good.
Anything else? Okay, and then again, talking about access control, I'll just share that like the main kind of problem we have with access is people unintentionally taking something secret and like accidentally communicating it to a group that's not supposed to have it, like the public internet, like your public GitHub repo or that kind of thing. There's nothing really actionable to be done here because I'm just trying to say like, do real good, guys. But yeah, be cognizant of the fact that the most likely way that something bad's going to happen is by you unintentionally taking something that wasn't supposed to be public and making it public, something like that. So just know that that's like the main thing that happens when it comes to data getting out, as opposed to attackers hacking into our systems and pulling that out. We do it for them. We just put it up on Pastebin and stuff like that. Accidentally. Okay, so we at Mozilla have some tools to make this a little bit easier, to make access control just a tiny bit easier. We have this thing called our data classification process. If you've been in Mozilla offices, you may have seen this poster floating around or maybe up on the screens. And I'll zoom into the interesting part here. These are our data classifications. We have 4 of them. And to be clear what these are, this isn't software, these aren't tools, this is a convention. This is a labeling convention that we use on data in order to enable the author of the data, or the owner of the data, to communicate to the consumers of the data what the author's intent is about who should see it. So we have these 4 categories. I'll just explain them, and then I think this will kind of come into view about what this means. So public is the easiest one. That's data that is meant to be seen by the entire world. So that's your public GitHub repo, that's our websites, Mozilla.org, all that kind of stuff. Marketing material that goes out into the world, it's all public. Mozilla Confidential staff and NDA Mozillians only. Out of mere curiosity, is there anyone here who is not either staff or has signed an NDA as a contributor? Okay, cool. That's kind of what I was expecting, but I'm not entirely sure. So Mozilla Confidential, staff and NDA Mozillians only, that means that as an owner of data, or an author of data, a doc, code, whatever, it's meant to be seen by everyone at Mozilla and all of our contributors who have signed an NDA. So this is a big community. There's not a huge barrier to entering this community, so it's not significantly different than public, but it is, there is any barrier. It is slightly different than public. But I don't want to overstate, I don't want to imply that this is like some tightly controlled group, because all you have to do is be a contributor who signs an NDA, which is achievable for a bad guy to do, potentially. This is a really long phrase to say, but we have to say it this way because of legal requirements, but I sometimes cheat. This says staff. So like public staff. Third one here, Mozilla Confidential, specific work groups only. This is when you have something that you want to make available to a group of people. You don't care who's in that group. You want to make something available to HR. You don't care who's in HR today. You don't care if a new HR person joins and one leaves. The intent of the content is to be for HR, and so specific work groups only is when you're trying to make something available to a group of people. In the case, when you label it like this, you got to make sure in your code, in the README, in the doc, whatever, to say who the groups are that this is for. And again, to make it clear, the goal, the reason we're talking about this is so another person who is reading that document or looking at that code can easily determine, without coming to you, whether they should share it with their buddy in HR or not, and whether they should share it with their buddy in ops or not. With this, they should be able to, in a self-service way, just know immediately what they should and shouldn't do. Last one, Mozilla Confidential, specific individuals only. This is where you have data that should only be accessed by a human, a specific human, or a set of humans. You don't care what job they do. It's for Joe, Alice, and whoever. An example of this would be like your password, your Mozilla password is something that only you are supposed to know. That would be categorized as specific individuals only. You're not actually ever supposed to show that to anyone else, that kind of thing. There's going to be HR data that's probably in this category. There's going to be our search partner contract details. That's going to be specific individuals where they don't even want to give it to a group. They trust specific people, and that's who gets it. So it's these labels. Not software, not tools. They're just labels. This is what they look like on Mana. These colors are the canonical colors to use, hopefully so that when you see them and when you make them, it triggers in your mind, blue, I know blue, that's stuff for all of Mozilla. Red, that's highly sensitive, only for specific people. This is what it looks like on a Mana page. Let me see it right here. This is what it looks like on a Google presentation. Mozilla Public. Any questions about this process or this idea? Okay. So, what I would ask you to do, I'll show you how to learn more about this in just a second here, but what I would ask you to do is if you have data, if it's public already, you can label it public, but maybe it's obvious that it's public because of the context that it's in. But if you have data that's not public, you should consider adding a label to it so that people know assuming it's data that you are responsible for, you're the owner of, you're the admin of, add a label to it so people know what you intend it to be used for and not used for. Even this alone is a good label because it means it's not public. Like, you didn't intend it to be public, so don't go put it in a public repo. That kind of thing. So label your work, and when you're going and using data, look for these labels and act accordingly. And if you have data, you're going to share it, you don't see a label, you could go to the owner and be like, hey, can I send this to Joe? Or you go to the owner and say, hey, can you put a data classification label on so I and everybody else know what you want us to do or not do with this? And you can learn more about this by Googling Mozilla data classification. Because it's on Wikidata. Okay, any questions about anything access control? Okay. What do you do if you see something that looks like it's not right? Like, I'll give a couple examples just to give you context. You go into your Google Doc and you see some edits, some vandalization or something in a Google Doc. Or you go to a Google Doc and you look in the share list and there's someone in there that you don't recognize, like you don't know who they are and you don't know how they got in that list. You administer a server and there's a user account with a name that you don't recognize. I imagine everyone at one point or another has had this experience where you're like doing something and the hair on the back of your neck goes up and you're like, wait a minute, that shouldn't be that way. That's weird. And it doesn't always mean that an attacker has gotten into your stuff. But when you have that notion, what I and my peers in my team would love you to do is to say something. Because the one problem we don't have right now is people coming to us too frequently and saying, I saw this thing that looked a little weird, and us going looking, being like, no, it's fine. Can you leave us alone already? That is not our problem. We don't have that problem at all. So we would love it if you would, when you encounter something that sends your spidey sense up, that says like, did something get hacked? Is something weird? Is there someone here that shouldn't be here? Anything like that? You should let us know. Yeah? This is how you let us know. By using the Fox signal. And by using the Fox signal, I mean sending an email to foxsignal@mozilla.com is the easiest way, because it's email, and hopefully it's something you can remember with my cool drawing here. Foxsignal@mozilla.com goes to our Mozilla Operations Center, and they will triage it, and in this category of things, likely send it on to April and my team, and we'll help you with it. And helping you with it may be taking a look and responding and saying, nope, that's totally okay, I can explain why, or maybe, hopefully not, but maybe being like, thank you for telling us about this is a big problem. And to give some context, maybe our worst breach ever was not discovered by our sophisticated monitoring tools. It was not discovered by our penetration testing team finding something. It was discovered by a user, a Mozillian, doing exactly this, just saying, hey, I saw this thing, it seems kind of weird. And that is how we found out about a large group of Russian hackers deep within Mozilla and our servers. Yeah. So, foxsignal@mozilla.com. If you're an IRC user, you can go to #mock and just highlight the name of the on-duty person in the topic. That's another way you can do it. And then everything else that's not that category of like, I think there's something wrong, I need to tell someone because there might be something wrong. If you have anything else you want to ask about security, security@mozilla.org is a great list for that. A lot of people on my team are on that, and everyone on there is super helpful. Yeah?
What level of detail can we give on that? Because there are like 1,000 people on it, so...
That's a great question. The best thing to do is probably to talk to to highlight the on person on-call person, see if you get a response, and then go to a private message with them. Again, this kind of comes back to the data classification thing, which you may be thinking like, all right, well, what's the data classification? Maybe you're not thinking this. I'm thinking, what's the data classification of the data of you sharing something about like a possible security concern? And I would say that that's probably something totally safe to communicate over private message in IRC, despite the fact that private message in IRC is not a highly secure medium. I would not be worried that an attacker is listening in on your private message between you and the on-call mock person about you reporting their potential exploit. I think if we're at that level, we're kind of screwed already. But no, that's a great question, because if you go into a room full of people, you probably don't want to be like, hey, is that server that's supposed to not be on the public internet on the public internet? And then everyone in the room is like, does that URL work? Oh, wow. And does the differentiation between the purpose of this and this make sense? Any more information on that you want? Okay. Anything else on what to do if you see something that seems like it might be wrong? Fox Signal at Mozilla.com. Okay. And lastly, let's see how we're doing. Great. We'll just talk about physical access briefly. Who here works in a Moz space, a Mozilla office? Okay. So I'll go through this quickly, because for people who don't work in Mozilla offices, this is probably less interesting, because if you work remote, then you already deal with your own physical access concerns. You have, I imagine, keys for your front door, and you try not to lose your keys, and when you do, you might rekey your house, that kind of stuff. So I'll leave that all to you. Why do we care about physical access in Mozilla spaces? People come in and steal stuff. People have restraining orders against them to not come to the office, and they come to the office. People are passionate, and people have things that they want to tell us about Mozilla's mission loudly in our faces. And we don't want them to do that, because it's not safe to have randos showing up and yelling at you. What this means is controlling who can and can't come into our offices. And I'll give you the easy part and the hard part. The easy part is always freely show your badge to anyone who asks. Anytime you're going into an office, if somebody asks to see your badge, obviously if it's someone that you work with all the time, they probably won't ask to see your badge because they know who you are. But if anyone asks to see your badge, just be your friendliest, best self and show them your badge, because one day you're going to have to be in their shoes asking someone, and it's just like a golden rule, pay it forward kind of thing, right? Just be give as little friction as possible and be like, oh, total, yes, of course, happy to, badge, that whole thing. So that's the easy part, is showing your badge. Hard part is you're going to the office, there's someone coming behind you, and they're not someone that you see at the office every day, which in our world of Mozilla probably means that they're working out of another office, they're remote-y, whatever, but you haven't seen them before. And so you have to go through this socially miserable process, but you can do it. You can do it because it's worth it, and it's brief, and it almost always goes really well. Okay, so basically you have to ask them hey, can I see your badge? Or I don't reckon. I go, hey, I'm Gene. I don't think we've met. Implying the other person's wait, why is this guy introducing himself to me in the doorway? Of course, he doesn't know who I am, he's going in, he's got a badge, that kind of thing. I don't know what the right answer about how to do this best is. You kind of have to, I think, to explore it yourself, but please do ask the question when people are coming in behind you that you don't recognize. If it's people that you work with and they work out of your office, or they don't work out of your office and you know they are, that's fine. This is not meant to protect against me getting fired and then coming in the next day and tailgating behind my colleague who I work with. Like this, I'm not worried about that risk. We're not defending against that today. Just if that happens, that happens. There's no good fix for that. There are good fixes for that. They involve like security guards and kiosks and man traps and crazy. We're not doing any of that stuff. So this is to defend against those other examples. People want to come in and steal stuff. People want to come in and talk to their girlfriend because this is the only place they can. And they just got to explain things. And there's people who you don't want in the office. And the thing to do, okay, so most of the time, this results in the person being like, oh yeah, of course, here's my badge. Sometimes it results in a Mozillian being like, oh yeah, I actually forgot my badge at home. And which is also a fine interaction because at that point you just have to be like, that's okay, you got to go down to reception. They'll give you a temporary badge, then you don't have to go in behind anyone, you have to go the whole day, it's totally fine. But the key here is if at any point in this conversation you get any weird spidey sense of any pushback where they're like, oh, I don't want to go down to reception, come on, just let me, as soon as that happens, okay, red flags going off like ding, 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 something is weird and wrong. Because in that situation, normally professional, competent, adults here, they get that, they're going to go down to security and get their temp badge. If it does not go smoothly, you are being social engineered. And that's when you need to then the whole thing gets really different. And I don't know how to guide you about this. This is when you're like talking to somebody who's trying to like sneak into the office. And then you just gotta be good. Just be like, can't help you, man, sorry. Just get inside. So that rarely, if ever happens, right? But that's, yeah.
I will note that although this is like super awkward, like I don't think anybody likes to ask somebody else to show them their badge.
Yeah.
At my old job, this is by far the most common way to break into a network. Was to be okay behind somebody and plug them into the network.
Yep.
And even in Mozilla, it has been used to plug in naughty devices into the network.
Yep.
This is a real problem, for sure.
Yeah. We have iPads stolen out of our San Francisco office. Our next door neighbors down in Mountain View. Guy comes in a delivery outfit, picks up a bunch of laptops, walks out. This totally happens. So just try real hard. Okay. Other questions on anything security related? Anything we've talked about? Anything we haven't talked about? Yeah.
Do you have a system or a way to prioritize security issues related to other security issues and maybe also related to product things you could be building?
Yes. So we have a risk modeling system that we use to identify the severity of risks. We categorize them into 4 buckets of low, medium, high, maximum. And those risks are composed of both the impact, if some horrible thing were to happen because of this vulnerability, like the impact being very different if all of our employees' social security numbers got leaked versus my not yet ready to be public code repo, because that would be embarrassing that people see my commits, like different levels of impact. It's composed of impact and likelihood. The likelihood being, considering all of these security controls we have, what's the likelihood that this risk is actually going to happen? So we have a risk model, and you Google Mozilla risk. I bet Mozilla risk probably gets it, but it's on Wikipedia. If you want to know more about that. Does that answer?
What about, obviously everyone wants to work on building cool new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of decide, this security problem is really important and needs to be fixed now?
Yeah, that model is our primary guidance about where we put our time.
So just say, we don't want to have any high stuff.
So for example, eliminating all maximum risks is like an OKR, a goal, a thing that even though we can only kind of encourage people to do it because I can't go into some random group's systems and change their stuff to make it more secure. But yes, we do that.
Cool, thanks.
We primarily focus on, my team, on enabling people to better understand the risk that they hold so they can make informed decisions about it. But there's some stuff, like maximum risk stuff, which we do kind of throw our way around and make the people fix. Yeah. Yeah. So you can use the Mozilla VPN. You can VPN into Mozilla, which is a great way to kind of put your mind at ease. That's a great thing to do.
The external one.
Not the, which, what's the
The external is not split tunnel, so if you're using a public Wi-Fi.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'm sorry, external is not split tunnel, so you want all your traffic to go through.
Right. So there's two VPNs that we run. One that's intended explicitly to enable you to get access to stuff inside data centers, and ignores your public traffic. It says, I don't want your Facebook traffic going through my data center. And the other one sends everything through. How do you differentiate between them?
Pretty much, right?
Do you know which ones? Or is there a wiki page? Or? Okay. So yeah, using a VPN, great solution. Getting your own VPN, also a great solution. They're dirt cheap, $5 a month, something like that. I will say that public Wi-Fi, there is this one challenge, which is that you can't actually, there's no graceful solution for how do I protect myself in the window of time between when I connect and when I start my VPN. This is in the category of hard problems that we as a technical community have not come to a good solution yet. So using a VPN is one good thing. Another is to just be cognizant of when you're on secure sites and when you're not. And by secure sites, I mean if you see use Firefox, use the green lock up here, it's HTTPS. That means that all of the traffic that I'm going to generalize here, all of your traffic is being encrypted. And so if you're at Starbucks on their public Wi-Fi and you're on your Gmail, you're on your, I think Facebook is HTTPS. Yeah, but you can easily check. The one thing I will say is this is what matters. Above this line, if you've got a site that has lots of gold locks and all kinds of stuff here, that doesn't mean anything. The only thing that counts is the stuff that is outside of the page and inside the browser Chrome up here. That's what you can look for. So yeah, VPN or use secure sites.
There's a man page, you just go to VPN.
And it talks about both kinds? Okay, great. Anything else? Other topics? What was the title of this? Everything you always wanted to know about security, but too afraid to ask. This is your chance to ask.
Do you have any horror stories that you can disclose with?
Sure. We had a group of hackers exploit a user's account due to password reuse. So that first example I gave of exploited site, compromised site, password reuse gets them into that user's Bugzilla, non-MFA'd Bugzilla account, which gets them, because that user had old access to security bugs that they didn't need anymore and didn't use anymore, gets them a view into Firefox 0 days that have not yet been patched. So none of this we've discovered yet. Attackers now have 0 days. 0 days being security bugs in Firefox that are not yet publicly known because they are very, very bad. They get that. They write exploitation code. They actually use our example code from the Bugzilla bug. This is actually how we catch it, is that the code they use is like copy-pasted from the Bugzilla bug that shows the bug. And they put it in advertisements targeted at Russian journalists. So it's like, it wasn't even like let's turn this exploit, let's turn this into money. It's like, let's turn this into, scary shit. I don't know, like,
Siberian prison.
yeah, like, so someone sees that and reports it to us, we go and look at it, and I don't know who, somebody was like, well, okay, we go and look at it, and we're like, oh, that's that 0 day we know about. We go and look at the bug, and we're like, that's our prototype code to show the bug in their exploit. How, and then we start looking at logs, and we're like, wait, why is this user looking at this bug? And yeah, that was bad.
So you do keep a log of who access security bugs and bugs there? All bugs or only security bugs?
I'm sure there's web server access logs for all bugs. I don't know what the retention is on them. Do you have a question?
Well, I think
Or a
you
comment?
you answered it,
Mhm.
but the security flaw from WPA2 from some months ago, where if you're not behind a VPN anymore, even if you're getting connecting to a wireless network, you're not secured anymore for the first few seconds between you're connected and your
Yeah.
VPN goes on.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say is that wireless security is not, it's not great. Every year that passes, to me it feels like people in the security arena consider your network behind a wireless access point to be more and more public. Yeah, there's just lots and lots of ways to exploit that. So his example is the Starbucks, where you already know it's public. You already know there are other people on that network who you don't know who they are. But even your home network potentially has your neighbors in it if they want to get in. Like, that's achievable. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Any thoughts on the load box?
Say again.
The load box, do you think that's the
I hope it's great. I hope it kicks the ass of all the other password managers, because I have not yet fallen in love with the password manager. I use LastPass, and it's like a really bad relationship. Like, I can't leave, but I am not happy. It's I really hope it's great, because there might be something great out there that I haven't used yet. I'm a Linux user.
I personally
I think most people do. So, do you like 1Password?
I actually really like one.
Okay.
Password.
Okay.
I would say there's two qualifications there. One is that I got it when it was like a reasonable price.
Okay.
Now I get current license is like $80, so you subscribe for like $3 a month.
Okay.
So that helps with my rent because I pay less. But I mean, that's a significant problem for a lot of the world, where
Absolutely.
paying for LastPass or 1Password monthly, $3 a month is
That's a really big deal.
really unaffordable
Yep.
to a lot of people.
Yep.
So a lot of the world is unsafe because they have no alternatives.
Yep.
Or things like KeyPass, which are good alternatives but very complicated.
Yep.
No, I'm saying I like that.
Okay. I'm a Linux user. I have to use LastPass. Dashlane is another one. They just introduced Linux support in the last month. I'm looking forward to trying it out, because maybe it'll be better. I don't know.
you guys use one package for data store, or do you have a code
Yeah, so there's two ways you can use 1Password. You can either use it, the way they push now, and it's like hard to get otherwise, is you keep your vault on their cloud network, which I think for most people is a great model, and I think that's the model we're using with a lot of phones as well. Just because it's so easy, right? Like, you just get access to it from all your devices, you don't have to worry about setting up a sync service. But you can set it up with a local vault if you want. You can set it up with a vault that is synced on a cloud service like Dropbox.
Yeah, so I have an iPhone and my 1Password synced to Dropbox. So I can access it pretty seamlessly on my phone.
That's exactly how I do it.
So yeah, if that will run on OS you run, which as long as it's not Linux, it will, because they do Windows and Mac. It sounds like a great option. But yeah, again, the key is use something.
And they do believe the U.S. is offering both 1Password. I think they have 1Password now that you can just hold them.
We have a static license for that now.
It's not, 1Pass is not in service now yet, is it?
It's not catalog right yet.
So yeah,
Soon though, right?
Soon, we're working on the licensing, but if you really want to impact it,
and I wouldn't characterize it as if you really want, because I'm always telling people just get it and expense it, or do it through ServiceNow, and no one is going to turn you down saying you can't have it.
yeah, it's all auto approved, so if you have the good protection.
They're both good. If you're using either, yeah, I'm not going to say one is better than the other. The main challenge, I think, with your mobile operating system relates to having a modern version of the OS. So the challenge is, or the benefit is, if you get an iPhone, you have a modern iOS for
5 years ago?
a long time. If you get an Android phone, it really depends. It depends on who you got the phone from and how long they're going to want to support it. But usually it is much shorter.
My personal recommendation to people would be to either get an iPhone or to get the Android phone made either by Google, because they support it for a long time, or get a super popular mainstream phone, like Samsung S series, like it has like hundreds of millions of people because they can maybe support them. In general, I would say to avoid off-brand or cheap deals of phones that have a much smaller run, because they can have much smaller support.
Yeah, and you're basically going to be buying a phone that will last you less long. Even though the phone
It's
is perfectly fine, the OS will age out. So like my phone right now has a known Bluetooth vulnerability on it because it's too old and my carrier won't update the OS. So I don't get to use Bluetooth on it. Okay, yes. Last one, yeah.
Why is the Foundation missing full disk encryption?
So at least with Mozilla issued stuff, they come with full disk encryption, but that's a great point. If you don't have full disk encryption, it is, let me explain what it is. That is where the entire contents of the disk are encrypted, and as soon as you turn it on, you type in a password to decrypt it. It is cheap and easy to do, and it means that if you ever lose your laptop, you have to be a lot less worried. So yeah, you have that option. If you don't have disk encryption, do it. Yeah. If you want the slides, or if you are willing to fill out a 2-question survey, bit.ly/Austin Mod Security, or this if you like QR codes. It'll take you 1 second if you want to do that. You can get the slides. I'm Gene. I lost my tag. I'm Gene at Mozilla.com. You're welcome to email me any questions or anything about this. I love talking about this junk. So thank you.